everybody. Today we are going to be taking a look at the table of elements. So if you have your textbook handy, you can open up to the back cover so you can take a look at the periodic table that's in your textbook. And if you didn't bring your textbook home, then you can have your periodic table that was handed out to you in class at hand. And you'll need a sheet of lined paper so you can record this note. Okay, here we go. So when we talk about an element, we're referring to a pure substance that cannot be broken down into a simpler substance. So if it's an element, then we know it's also going to be found on the periodic table of elements. So two examples would be chlorine or silver. When we look on the periodic table, you'll notice that they're all listed. There's a symbol, they have a name, right? And we'll learn what some of those numbers mean in a future lesson, but it's important to know that all of these elements and their atoms are the building blocks of all substances. All right, and you'll notice on this example here that there are different columns that are colored differently. All right, and again, we'll learn about all the different families that we find on the periodic table. A compound is also a pure substance, and it's made from two or more different elements that are chemically joined together. So the diagram here is of a water molecule. So the gray spheres represent hydrogen, and there's two of them, and you have the one red sphere representing oxygen. So we can notice that something is a compound because it typically has a formula, and that formula is made up of the symbols of each element and subscripts representing how many atoms of each element there are. On a diagram of a periodic table, you'll notice that there's this bolded black line that separates two sides of the table. And in your textbook, the periodic table also has this bolded line. I believe it's a dark blue line. The periodic table that was handed out to you in class does not have this line on it, but you can pause the video and take a moment and draw that line in. So when we start talking about the left side and the right side of the periodic table, we are referring to the left side or the right side of that bolded staircase line. So metals are found on the left and center of the periodic table. So metals can include copper, lead, tin, nickel, zinc, and steel. And steel is actually an alloy made of different metals. Some typical physical properties of metals are that they are lustrous or shiny. They are malleable, so we can fold them and hammer them, shape them. They are ductile, we can pull them into wires. And they conduct electricity and heat. So I'm going to ask that you pause the video and open up your textbook to page 208 and read the short article called The Mad Hatter. Right? So it's Mercury and the Mad Hatter. When you're done reading it, on your note sheet, I'd like you to answer these 4 questions. Where did the saying Mad Hatter come from? Other than felt making, what were some uses of mercury? Today, where does mercury pollution mainly come from? And lastly, how was the community of Grassy Narrows impacted by mercury contamination? So again, pause the video, answer these questions in your notes, and then continue on. Nonmetals are found on the right side of the periodic table. So carbon, phosphorus, and sulfur. Okay, you probably noticed that they look a little different than the images of metals on the previous slides. So some typical physical properties of nonmetals is that they are usually a gas or a dull powdery solid. Nonmetals typically do not conduct electricity or heat. A metalloid are the elements that are found on the staircase-shaped part of the periodic table that separates the metals and the nonmetals. These metalloids sometimes are also referred to as semi-metals, and they are going to have properties of both the metals and the nonmetals. So if you notice here on this periodic table, everything that is in blue would be a metal, everything that is in yellow would be a nonmetal, and you'll notice hydrogen hanging out over there, right? It is a nonmetal, but it's hanging out with family 1 because it has some chemical properties similar to family 1, and we'll talk about those in the future. The pink boxes represent those metalloids, and you see that they are right along that staircase. So it's time to review. On your note sheet, number 1 to 6, and as you go through the following substances, determine if it is an element or compound. Aluminum, sodium chloride, germanium, ozone, ethanol, iodine. Aluminum, sodium chloride, germanium, ozone, ethanol, and iodine. So for each one, determine if it's an element or a compound. So for tomorrow's class, I'll do a homework check for the following. I'll check to see that your note for this video lesson is completed, that you have answered the 4 questions that relate to Mercury and the Mad Hatter, the reading from your textbook, and the answers for the substances, determining whether they were elements or compounds, as the review from the previous slide. So have a great night, and I will see you all tomorrow.